a very bright group of people here. So let me now begin sharing my screen. Well, good afternoon, all participants. I am very glad to be here today with you, and I'll talk on this topic which was mentioned by Mehta Saab. So I will be talking about a framework called Water Accounting Plus. Now, this course that you are attending here is concerned with use of satellite data or space-based data. So I have assembled some material which will show how this data can be used for taking decisions concerning water resources management. I will start with a broad framework and then we will come down narrowly to application of this software to two Indian basins to highlight that what is possible using this kind of software and how these softwares help in overcoming some of the limitations and challenges that our people face in field. So, since this lecture is concerning water, let us first spend a few minutes in looking at the availability of water on earth. Mehta Sahab, I hope my voice is clear and I am not going very fast. I am trying to speak slowly so that people don't miss anything. Right? Okay, so here you see, yes please. Yes.
Sir, we are listening properly.
Okay, thank you.
So you can move.
Okay, thank you. So here we see three columns. Let us start from the first column or the leftmost column, which shows the total global water. And many of you might be aware that out of the total global water, nearly 96.5% of the water is present in ocean. There is another 0.9% water which is called other saline water. So close to 97.4% of the total water is saline water, which is of limited use to us. Of the remaining 2.5% water is called fresh water. That means it is of the quality which can be used by humanity. But then major part of this water, this fresh water, is in glaciers and ice caps, about 68.7%. 30.1% is buried in deep groundwater. So surface and other fresh water are only 1.2%. So this is 1.2% of the 2.5% water that we have. Just please excuse me for a minute. किसमें करें कंज्यूमर में करें ना मैं करके दे दूँ अच्छा हाँ so out of the 2.5% fresh water that we have, only about 1.2% is available for use by humanity. Now, the breakup of this 1.2% is most 69% of the water, lakes are 20.9%, then some water is in soil moisture, swamps, 0.49% in rivers, 0.26% in living things, which means plants and other things, 3% in atmosphere. So I would request that others may please mute their mic so that we have.
I request all the participants, please mute your mic. Sir, please continue.
Yeah, please, you can have a idea that of the total water available on earth, a very small quantity is available for us, which is in lakes, in swamps, marshes, rivers, living things, and from atmosphere. So within this small quantity we need to manage. You will also know that earth is known as a blue planet because about 3/4 of the surface area of earth is covered by water, but this water is in ocean, which is of very little or limited use to the humanity. Now in any water related study, we begin with hydrologic cycle. So this here is a pictorial representation of what is called hydrologic cycle. Since this is a cycle, it has no beginning and no end. Let us start from the atmospheric part. So on top, you can see some clouds which denote the water available in atmosphere. This water from atmosphere falls on the land in the form of precipitation. Some of this precipitation falls on the land part of the earth, which is shown in the left part, and some of it falls on the oceans, which is shown in the right part. Water falling on land can be in liquid form, it can also be in solid form or snow. So snowfall typically takes place in mountain areas where snow gets deposited on mountain peaks and slopes, and it gradually melts with the availability of heat. Now some water is trapped by the plants and vegetations. This is called interception loss. Plants consume water for their primary productivity function. So they take water from the soil through their roots and do a process called photosynthesis. As a result of photosynthesis, the water leaves the plants, goes to the atmosphere in the form of transpiration. Then some water is evaporated from bare soil, from lakes, rivers and other open water bodies, and these two together are called evapotranspiration. Then water also flows on the surface of the earth. Some water enters into the ground through infiltration. In the ground zone, water moves in a down gradient direction till it comes to a lake, or it may come back again on the surface, it may join a river, and ultimately it may join an ocean. From ocean, water also evaporates because of heat of the sun, and it joins the atmosphere. So this is the way this cycle keeps on going continuously, uninterrupted, in various forms at different places on earth, and the energy to move this cycle comes from sun. As you know, sun is the primary source of energy for everybody on the earth, including water cycle, and since the thermal energy of sun moves this water cycle is also called a thermally driven system. Now to give you some idea of the numbers involved, so we have main reservoirs which are black cubic kilometer into 1000. Ocean storage is mentioned here. Lakes, reservoirs, etc. is 176,000 cubic kilometer. Then the flow of moisture is shown in red number. So, for example, from ocean, evaporation is 413,000 cubic kilometer per year. precipitation on ocean is 373,000 cubic kilometer per year. Then water vapor moves from ocean to land. Atmospheric storage is 12.7 thousand cubic kilometer. Then land precipitation is 113, evaporation from land is 73, surface flow is 40, and so on. So this all numbers give you an idea of the magnitude of various terms involved. Since this is a thermally driven system, as our atmosphere is warming or we are facing global warming, it is likely that the cycle will intensify, so there will be more evaporation, more precipitation, and more water will come to various parts of the earth due to this change. This in fact is what is called climate change impact on water resources and hydrologic cycle, and this is a very big subject for study, because it is said that climate change is going to affect the humanity mainly through water cycle. Now, moving on, I go to the next slide, which is now mathematical representation of hydrologic cycle. We just saw what is hydrologic cycle. Now, how to assess the quantities involved in water cycle at different scales, and how to make use of the knowledge thus gained. So in that process, the primary equation is what is called water balance equation or a continuity equation, and this equation is based on the fact that during the movement in hydrologic cycle, no is not destroyed. Only thing is the form of water changes and its occurrence and availability changes. When I say the form of water changes, in the global hydrological cycle, water is available in its all three forms. And what are the three forms? One form of water is solid water, which is nothing but ice or snow. So we have ice and snow present in hydrologic cycle. It is present on mountains, and it is also present when we have snowfall. Then most of the water in the hydrologic cycle is present in liquid form. It is present in ocean, it is present in rivers, lakes, etc. It falls as rain. And the third form is water vapor, which is we see when the water is evaporated or transpired from land. It is the water which is carried from ocean part to earth part to the land part, and water is stored in atmosphere also in vapor form. So water is present in all three forms, and then this equation says it has the terms here. Some of the terms are shown in green arrow, some are over the red arrow. So green arrow are what is, you can say, income part, red is expenditure part, and then we have some other terms. So let us look at these terms. So here P is precipitation, QSI is flow of water through surface. Now consider that we apply this water balance equation to a river basin. And since you are from Gujarat, let us consider that we apply this equation to Sabarmati basin. So in that case, P will represent precipitation over Sabarmati basin. QSI will indicate water which is entering in the Sabarmati basin as a surface flow. It may be from some other place, for example, Narmada canals bring some water to Sabarmati basin, so that becomes QSI. Likewise, if there is some inflow through groundwater route, that is called QGI. So this is what is coming into the Sabarmati basin through various routes. Now water may be leaving this Sabarmati basin through evaporation, that is capital E. It may be leaving through surface route, that is QSO. And you can assume that QSO is the water which goes from Sabarmati river to the ocean. Then QGO is similarly water going out through groundwater. So these are outflow terms. Then we have a term minus delta S. Delta S basically is change in storage of water. So if we apply this equation for a period of say 1 month, then over that month, what is the change in storage in the basin? Maybe this storage is, say some storage is accumulated in Dharoi reservoir, some in say Vasna barrage and some other places. So that is all put together, some in soil moisture, delta S. Now if you assemble all these terms, it happens sometimes that the sum is not zero. We have a term takes care of unbalanced part of water balance, and that unbalanced part might be because there is some error in computation of various terms. There may be, some missing data, there may be some component which we could not account for, and so on. So if we account for all that, we get 0 on the right hand side. Now, as I mentioned, this water balance equation can be applied to any water body or any area and any time interval. So we just saw that it can be applied to Sabarmati basin, it can be applied to Mahi river basin, it can be applied to a geographical area, for example Saurashtra. It can be applied to say whole Gujarat and so on. Then this equation can be applied to any time interval. It could be 1 hour, it could be 1 day, it could be 1 year, it could be 1 decade, and so on. So depending upon the problem of interest, we can have various types of water balance equations, and then depending on the specific problem, the term of water balance equation may be further subdivided. For example, suppose I want to apply this equation to the Dharoi reservoir, then my term surface water outflow, it could mean the outflow through spillway, it could also mean outflow through under sluices, it could also mean outflow through Dharoi canal system, and so on. So various forms are possible. Now with this introduction, let me move to hydrologic models. Before I move, if there are some very quick questions, we can take up now, or maybe we can take up the questions at the end. I don't know, Mehta Sahab may advise. Okay, so now friends, what is a hydrologic model, or what are hydrologic models? Models, I am sure you all must be familiar. These are simplified representation of a real world system. We just talked of
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Sir, participant will write the question in the chat box.
Okay.
So at the end, I will speak out all the questions, and then we can do the discussion.
Very good, very good. So I'll try to finish slightly before time so that we have.
Okay. Yes, sir. So before means 1:20, we can means you can end your session, and last 10 minutes we can have question answer and discussion session.
Okay, very good.
Okay, fine.
So a model is a very simplified representation of reality, and we construct models for a number of reasons. Some of the reasons are shown here. Let's see, we have some observations. For example, we measure the flow of Sabarmati river at Ahmedabad gauging site. Now, this observation can tell us how much water is available at the moment. If we have past measurements, then the measurements can also tell us how much water was available at Ahmedabad in the past. But the measurements at Ahmedabad cannot tell us how much water is available in the river, for example, at Gandhinagar or at Dharoi. For that information, either we do measurements at the desired site, or we use some model. To further illustrate this point, please look at the map at the bottom of this slide. This is the map of Narmada River. Now there are two cross marks here. One is a cross mark with black color near the tail end of the basin. Suppose we measure the flow at this place, which is let's say Omkareshwar site. So this measurement can tell us only how much water is available at this place. But suppose I need information about water availability at some upstream station. Maybe this is a Manoj site. So from this observation, I cannot find out how much water is available here. Further, if I know that the amount of water available at say Omkareshwar today is this much quantity, but I wish to know how much would be the water available next month, I cannot get that information from this measurement. So to answer this type of questions, I need a hydrologic model of the basin, which can tell me how much would be the water available at different locations and how much water I can expect in future. Now, in many management related tasks, it is also important to know that in this basin, how much water is then available at different locations and at different times. So that answer can be provided by the model. And then how much water will be available in future at different locations, that information also I can get from a mathematical model, provided the model has that capability. Further, many times we want to take a decision, but before taking a decision, we need to understand what are the consequences of that decision. And these type of questions are known as what if question. So I may be interested in finding out what happens if I build a dam at this location, which is say Sardar Sarovar Dam. So if now of course that dam exists, it is operational, but let's move to some other location slightly upstream of Sardar Sarovar, let's say at this place. So I may be interested in asking a question, what happens if I build a dam at this location? What will be the consequences or benefits, costs, etc. if I build a dam at this location, which is say 100-meter high? Or what are the consequences, benefits, cost of a dam which is 105-meter high, 110-meter high, and so on. Now you will realize that it is not a good idea, or it is also not feasible to build dams of different heights and find out the cost and benefits. That we cannot do because of obvious reasons. But this type of question can be quite reasonably well answered by a model of the catchment. So without physically building the dam, I can answer this question, what are the consequences of this dam height? Likewise, there can be other, questions. For example, this green patch here that you see, that is denoting forested area. Now, I may be interested in asking if some forested area is converted to agriculture land, then what are the consequences on hydrology, what are the consequences on society, what are the consequences on environment, and so on. Likewise, if there is a barren land here and I convert that barren land to forest land, then again what are the various consequences that I may wish to know. So all this can be answered by mathematical models. But there are difficulties in applying mathematical models. One difficulty is that critical data are not always available. Many times we wish to solve a problem, but the input data that is needed, that data may not be available. Then the available data may not be up to date. I wish to find out what type of benefits I will get if I build a dam today, but I may have data only for the past decade, not current data. So I may not be able to, get a realistic answer to the question. Then the measured data may have errors which may not be quantifiable. I may not be really knowing how much is the error in the data. Suppose someone comes and tells me that discharge data is, say discharge in Narmada river at Garudeshwar is 5,000 cumac. Now, I may not have much idea as to how reliable this quantity is. Then another difficulty is that model outputs are not properly validated. Model is giving some results, but I do not know how correct these models are, the results of the model are. And finally, the model outputs are not directly usable by decision makers. Sometimes the output of the model is in a form which really doesn't make much sense with the people expected to use the data. And this happens in real life also. For example, those of you who have experience with, let's say, courts, sometimes the court decisions are beyond the comprehension of a normal person. He goes to the court with a case, the judgment comes. Now, poor fellow may be simply interested in knowing whether he has won the case or lost. But the judgment may be so lengthy and so difficult that he needs someone to interpret it and tell him what are the implications. So same thing may happen with our hydrologic models also. And finally, please don't underestimate the importance of measurement. A very famous quote says that you cannot manage what you don't measure. So unless you do adequate amount of measurements, have good quality of data, management becomes difficult. With this, let us look at what are the determinants of a decision wheel. So here we have a water problem. We have surface water, we have groundwater, evapotranspiration is taking place from these water bodies. We have unutilized flow. This water is giving some agriculture services, it is giving some hydrological ecosystem services. We have resource base, we have question of sustainability and so on. Now, water is required for food security. Water may have some beneficial consumption, it may have some non-beneficial consumption, that we will see a little later. A question may be how, where and when water is consumed in river basins. Then water is used in agriculture, and very important for agriculture uses are land productivity and water productivity. Then we have the concept of green water and blue water, which we will see shortly. We face water scarcity, we have consumptive use of water, we have non-consumptive use of water, we have man-made changes in the catchment, we have plans for allocation of water, we need to know how much surface water is available, when and where, what are the safe groundwater withdrawal plans, and so on. Finally, there may be some water which is unmanageable, there is some water which is manageable, and with all these complexities we have to manage our hydrologic systems. Now these days when we manage our hydrologic system, particularly for say agriculture uses, there is lot of emphasis on productive use of water. And if you look at recent economic surveys which are presented by government in the parliament, so these surveys are also now putting lot of emphasis for efficient ways of water use by farmers, because total available water is of limited quantity and we have to make best use of the water that is available. Similarly, we have this organization NABARD, National Agriculture Bank for Rural Development. It has important role in agriculture services. So NABARD also says that it is now time to shift focus from land to water productivity in farming, which means that water productivity has two parts. One is water productivity and another is land productivity. Now, and necessary that we produce more crop by using same amount of water, or we go to the proper, the famous slogan by Government of India, per drop more crop. Okay. Now, a typical question which is asked while using water for beneficial purposes is how much water we can withdraw in a sustainable manner. And I think people in Gujarat are very much familiar with this question, because in Gujarat, in some places, groundwater withdrawal is unsustainable because water tables are falling down. This puzzle sometimes is what you see here. The person on the right hand side sees 3 bars, but the person on left hand side sees 4 bars. Or we have the problem wherein one elephant goes to a village where 5 or 7 blind men approach the elephant, and since these men had no visual ability, they touch the elephant, and from the touch they make some conclusion. So one person says elephant is like a column, another person says it is like a fan, and so on. So there can be different perspective of looking at the same problem, and what we need is an independent, scientifically sound and standardized system that describes all flows and stock of water or water availability in a river basin, and then this information can be used for decision making. So one package or one system for that purpose is what is known as Water Accounting Plus. This is a system which is based on pixels. Pixels, called picture element. It can be a regular area on the ground, say 1 square kilometer by 1 square kilometer, or some similar type of area. Then this is a open source product, which means that it is available free of cost for people to use, easy to understand. It has results in form of what they call fact sheets, which are based on spreadsheets. It uses the concept of green and blue water. It is using large quantity of satellite-based data. We just talked about data limitations. So to overcome those limitations, it uses satellite-based data, and then it provides independent estimates. And then it answers the question of data unavailability, data scarcity. Water withdrawals can be of several types which are accounted for in the system. Non-consumption flow water is accounted for. Recoverable, non-recoverable flows are quantified. Agriculture water consumption is quantified. Beneficial, non-beneficial, partitioning, ET, groundwater recharge, surface water, ecosystem services, sustainability. All these questions are answered. So let us look at this package and try to understand how it can be useful to all of us. Now, for whom this package is targeted, it is targeted to 3 major groups shown here: water managers, water planners, basin authorities, and of course these are very broad groups. So they include all the professions, all the government organizations, all the academicians, students, and general public. Because these days general public has a very important role in management of water resources. So water managers may be interested in implementing integrated water resources management. Water planners may be interested in increasing water productivity, food production, farmers' income. And basin authorities may be interested in improved water resources assessment and allocation. And you will notice that some part of it, like water productivity, food production, increasing farmers' income, are nothing but the tasks defined by KS Ashish Yojana. Similarly, we have this target set by government to provide better assessment of water resources and improve water. Now, with this introduction, let's look at an overview of this water accounting package. So first of all, it makes heavy use of remote sensing data or space-based data, satellite data. So you know, these days we have a large number of satellites which are going around the earth continuously at various frequencies with various onboard sensors, measuring different parts of earth, measuring same part at some repetitive cycle, measuring different properties of earth feature, and these involve lots of things. For example, biomass production, evaporation, precipitation, land use, presence of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, etc. All this information is derived from the data captured by satellites, and these are then used for taking decisions, say, regarding water productivity, and many more decisions, in fact, are taken based on this data. So, Water Accounting Plus makes use of public data sets to analyze flows, fluxes, etc. Now, this gives a broad overview in the way this information is presented here. For example, you see two maps here. The left-hand map is what is called mean CHIPS precipitation. Here, this funny word CHIPS stand for Climate Hazard Group Infrared Precipitation with Station Data. It is a service provided by University of Colorado in USA, and this website has 35 years of quasi-global rainfall data sets. So this data set goes back to past about 35 years, and the length of data set is increasing. It is available from 1981 to nearly present time. This database is available for all the areas between 50 degrees south, 50 degrees north latitudes and all the longitudes. It is freely available data, and you can go to this site. The address is listed here, and then know more about the CHIPS data set and other data sets. And then on the right hand side, we have what is called mean ensemble ET. Here the word ET stands for evapotranspiration. So this here shows how the evapotranspiration varies with the location in a given river basin. Now let's try to understand what are the variables used in the water accounting system and how these are measured or estimated by remote sensing data. So first variable of interest is evapotranspiration data, and this package makes use of a data product called MODIS data. MODIS stands for a satellite which is called named Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer, MODIS. This MODIS satellite provides a range of products. One of them is global evapotranspiration estimation, and this here gives the details of the algorithm which is used by MODIS to compute the evapotranspiration. So the flowchart of the algorithm is given here. The data used here are LAI, which is nothing but leaf area index. This is the data that can be captured by satellite. Then we have this land cover maps, which can be again very easily generated by satellite data. We have albedo and EVI. EVI is Enhanced Vegetation Index. You know, from the satellite data, a number of vegetation and soil indices can be calculated. For example, there is a famous index called NDVI, Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. There is a soil index called SAVI, and so on. Then it uses radiation, data, air temperature data, air pressure, humidity, etc. And then all these data are used in a way shown here to finally come with evapotranspiration estimation. So these data are also freely available on the net, and you can go to Moody's site and get the data. Then comes precipitation, and you know, I think very well that these days satellites are being increasingly used to measure precipitation, and there are a number of satellite missions which are in operation to measure precipitation and distribute the data to the users. One such mission is called GPM, Global Precipitation Measurement. It is a successor of a experiment which was called TRMM, which was Tropical Rainfall Measurement Mission. Anyway, this GPM realizes, it makes use of microwave data. So both passive and active microwave measurements are used, and radars like GPM is a dual frequency precipitation radar which transmit and receive signals back to the radar. So what basically radar does is it emits signals in all directions, and if rain is falling, then the satellite signals will hit the raindrops, get reflected and come back to the radar. And the time taken by them to return to the radar is an indication of the distance where the rainfall is taking place, and then the strength of the signal gives the strength of the rainfall intensity. So that is how radars measure the rainfall, and this slide gives some information about the algorithm to measure precipitation, but again detailed data is available at their website, which can be easily searched by using the Google search. Then we have measurement of soil moisture. Again, this is this is being regularly done by use of remote sensing. But let me also, of course, caution that at present, through remote sensing, we can only estimate moisture present in the upper centimeters of the soil, and some indirect estimation is to be applied to go to the deeper soil layers. So with this background now, these are the global data sets which are used in Water Accounting Plus. For example, for precipitation, it uses TRMM. Then we talked about CHIRPS, so that is also used, GPM and ASCAT. All these data sets are freely available and used. Some studies were done to validate the CHIRPS data or all these data with the IMD rainfall data, and in that exercise CHIRPS data comes out very well. So it is very closely able to reproduce the data observed by IMD. Similarly, for soil moisture, we have GLDAS and SCAT. For evapotranspiration, lot of data sets. MODIS we have seen. So one particular data set is MOD, then GLEAM, CMR set, ET ensemble. Ensemble means rather than using data from one source, you use data from various sources. Then MODIS also gives us LAI, leaf area index. Land use and land cover are available from a very wide range of sources, including MODIS. Then we have grey water footprint, environmental water flow, elevation data, GRACE data, and so on. So a lot of global data are available based on typically remote sensing measurements, And much of this data is freely available, so anybody can download and use this data. Okay, I hope it is clear whatever we have talked. Now, for any study involving water resources, our land use data is very important. In WA plus framework, land use has been classified in around 80 classes, which is as per the global norms. Out of this, of course, some land use classes may be available in one place, some may not be available. But broadly, for management perspectives, land resources are classified in 4 categories. Protected land use. So these are the land uses where there is no human intervention, or these are protected areas. For example, in India, forests are protected areas. Some lakes may be protected area in the sense that no human disturbance is allowed. And some other land uses like your glaciers or other places may be protected land uses. Then we have utilized land uses which are used for some specific purpose, maybe it may be pasture, which may be used for grazing, etc. Then we have modified land use. So maybe this area had forest earlier, but that has been modified to agriculture area, and now crops are grown here. Some land uses may have managed water use. For example, here this farmer is providing water to his crops by using a tube well or groundwater. Now, somewhere in the beginning, I mentioned about a concept called blue water and green water. There are 2 figures which try to tell us in detail what is blue water, what is green water, and then the definitions are written at the bottom. So green water is the basically soil moisture or water available in soil moisture and plants, which is coming mainly from precipitation and used by plants via transpiration. On the other hand, blue water is the water or fresh water stored in water bodies such as lakes, streams, groundwater, glaciers and snow. And these definitions are also written here. And if you see this diagram, so the water present in soil moisture and in crops, that is all green water. Blue water is water present in, say, aquifers, in oceans and in lakes. Now, WA plus distinguishes between green water flow and blue water flow, and it tries to partition ET into these 2 components based on what is called an analysis called Budayko analysis. It also has 2 types of pixels, blue pixels and red pixels. Blue pixels are pixels where most of the water is in blue water, and other type of pixels is what is known as green pixels. Now this here is what is known as Budayko theory. This theory was proposed by a Russian climatologist Mikhail Budayko in 1974. What this theory does is it classifies catchments into 2 categories. One is humid, another is arid. Now if you look at this curve, which is known as Budayko curve, here on the x-axis we have what is called dryness index, which is PET, potential evapotranspiration divided by precipitation. And on the y-axis we have evaporative index, which is actual evapotranspiration divided by potential evapotranspiration, or precipitation. Now here you see there is a vertical line which divides this axis in 2 parts. energy limited catchment and water limited catchment. So if the dryness index is between 0 and 1, which means the potential evapotranspiration upon precipitation is either 1 or less than 1, which means potential evapotranspiration is more than the precipitation. These catchments are called energy limited catchment. That means the catchments have water, but they don't have adequate energy to evaporate that water. To evaporate water, you require energy. Now, these catchments where this index is more than 1, it is between 1 to 2, these are water limited catchments. That means here energy is present to evaporate water or to cause evapotranspiration, but water is not present. And then here we have this evaporative index. So using this theory, the catchments are divided into, or the ET is divided into green ET and blue ET by using this equation, which says ET green upon P equal to 5 tan hyperbolic 1 upon 5 into 1 minus exponential minus 5 whole square root, where phi is equal to PET upon P, which is basically dryness index. So if you know dryness index, that means you know PET, you know P, you can find out what is ET green. And if I subtract from total ET green, I get ET blue. Now, this here shows there can be two types of situation. One is that we have rain-fed crop, and in our country, many parts are having rain-fed irrigation. There is no irrigation beyond rainfall. And then we have irrigated crops where rainwater is available as well as irrigation water is available. So, in WA plus, calculations are organized in 8 sheets, which are listed here. Let's look at one of the sheets, which is called sheet 2, which shows evapotranspiration. Now this data is for a basin called Subarna Rekha Basin in Jharkhand, West Bengal, Chhattisgarh area of our country. It's a small river basin. So here calculations were done for a year June 2010 to May 2011. Total evapotranspiration is 23.1. Then I get this partitioning of total evapotranspiration into non-manageable, manageable and managed. Then non-manageable means this is taking place from protected land use. I cannot have any intervention here. Then manageable is from either utilized land use or modified land use. So I can have some control here, and managed contains modified and managed. And then in this category of managed, we have put modified land use and managed land use. The further breakup shows where from this evapotranspiration is taking place, from forest, shrubland, natural grassland, here again forest, rain-fed crops, irrigated crops, indoor, domestic and so on. Then further it categorizes this ET into non-beneficial as well as beneficial. So this is something which is beneficial to the economy. Non-beneficial, of course, is having certain part which is beneficial to the society. But looking at these numbers, you can determine as to where from water is used for evapotranspiration. And then we can take a decision to modify land use, to modify the cropping pattern, etc. If we find that from a particular category we are having too much loss of water due to ET. Okay. Now this here is a sheet which shows agriculture services in details. So it shows what are the various land uses, and then what are the land productivity from different uses. For example, here we have these 4 rows. First row is yield from rain-fed, so it is 2141. Then from the irrigated land, the yield from rainfall is 964. Incremental yield by irrigation water is 1361, giving rise to total yield as 2325. Okay. So again, water productivity also same type of information is available, and using this I can decide whether I am having the water productivity and land productivity in the acceptable region. Now this here is the actual data of land productivity in terms of kilogram per hectare for different years, and we have the data from rain-fed agriculture, we have the data from irrigated lands. Now this data can be used with the estimates that we obtained here to find out whether our values are within the range or not. So you can see that here the range is 2141 to 2325, and the total yield data in those years are quite close to the yield mentioned in this table. This table has come again from NABARD. Similarly, we have information about water productivity for different years from rain-fed area, from irrigated area, and this chart is for cereals. So using this chart also we can determine whether our data are matching computation. Now this information is available to us in a spatially distributed form. So as I mentioned in the beginning, it is a model which is pixel based. So that means for each pixel calculations are carried out, and so I have the output also for different pixels, and you can see here that we have land productivity in kilogram per hectare for year 2003-4, which was a normal year. This is the map of productivity for irrigated rice, and this is the map for productivity of rain-fed rice. So using this map, we can then find out what was the yield in different parts of the catchment for this particular crop. Similar to land productivity, now we have water productivity. Again, same thing, rain-fed rice, irrigated rice, normal year for various pixels in the basin. Now, again, to verify this data, we have this diagram from the NABARD report mentioned here, water productivity mapping of major Indian crops. And again, for these states, Jharkhand, West Bengal and Odisha, both land productivity and water productivity computed by WA Plus were in the range mentioned by NABARD. Again, similar type of information from agriculture statistics, which is published by Government of India for different years. So here also figures are comparable. Now, a very good use of this type of information is that we know from these maps what are the places where we are having high land productivity and high water productivity. So these are probably some farmers who have very progressive outlook, who are using modern means of irrigation to achieve high land productivity and high water productivity compared to their counterparts. So maybe we can identify these farmers, organize brainstorming sessions with all the farmers, wherein these farmers tell their experiences, share their experiences to others, and tell them how they can achieve very high productivity. And some of the other farmers may also be energized and motivated to achieve high productivity, and that would be very good for all of us, for the society, for the farmers, for the nation, and so on. So this is a very good use of this type of information. Then some more information: utilized flow, man-made utilized flow, then utilized flow natural. Then groundwater information is available: how much vertical recharge, how much withdrawal is there, what is the return flow, and what is the return flow from surface water. And this all can also be used to determine where water withdrawals are higher, where recharges are higher or lower. Now, this here, friends, is a sub-basin wise map of the Subarnrekha basin. So this basin has been divided into 9 sub-basins, and at the outlet of each of these basins you have this data available, which can be used for planning and decision making. And this here is a detailed chart for surface water flows. So it gives runoff, surface water withdrawal, return flow, outflow. And if you remember the previous map, so the sub-basins 1, 2 and 3 are headwater basins. Output of this is going to sub-basin 4. So similarly, in this place also, from 1 to 3 sub-basins, now the output goes to sub-basin 4. Then from 4, 5, 6, 7, output goes to 8. From 8, it goes to 9. Finally to the basin outlet. So this way, very easy to understand way information is available. Now this here is validation of discharge data. So this catchment has a discharge data at a place called Bilib Budulu, where observed data was available. So this observed data is plotted along with the simulated data, and from this chart you can make your own judgment whether the model is able to successfully simulate the flow or not. Then some more information on groundwater. Then this is some information on water stressed area. In India, in many places groundwater withdrawals exceed recharge. And so water tables are falling down, which is harmful for the farmers, which is harmful for the ecosystem, which is also harmful for the river, and so on. So on left hand side, you can see a map where critical blocks and over-exploited blocks have been identified based on the data from CGWB and state groundwater departments. And you can very clearly see the zones marked on this map. Right hand side, we have this similar map produced by Water Accounting Plus, where 2 zones of groundwater stress have been identified, and these are the places where withdrawals exceed recharge. And you can see clearly that the maps produced by CGWB and State Groundwater Board match very closely with the Water Accounting Plus maps. That is another proof that this algorithm or this thing is working very well. Now a summary sheet is produced here in the package, which is called resource base or sheet 1, which is a basically summary of all the information shown in previous spreadsheets. So here now precipitation is giving 99.5 cubic kilometer per year of water. Then desalination 0, surface water inflow 0, groundwater inflow 0. So there is some recycled precipitation. Gross inflow is 101.3, and there is some change in storage 7.8. So net inflow to the basin is 93.5. Please note that this data is for a different basin, Kaveri basin. Now this is partitioned into landscape ET, into exploitable water, Landscape ET is also partitioned into protected land use, into utilizable land use, into modified and so on. Then exploitable water is also partitioned into these components. So you have a summary information in this sheet where you know how much water is leaving the basin as ET, how much as surface water out at the outlet. This is the water going out of the basin through, say, some canals or something. This is the groundwater flowing out of the basin. So this sheet gives you an overall idea of the water storages, fluxes in the basin, and then this can be used for allocation and for management of water. Finally, you have this average annual water balance for the basin, which shows gross inflow, which shows rainfall, ET, which shows total ET, incremental ET, outflow from the basin, and so on. So we began this journey with water balance, noting that water balance is a very useful exercise in hydrology, which tells us a lot about the basin or the area where we are interested. This analysis can be done for different units. Most probably a hydrologist will carry out water balance analysis for a river basin. But this package water accounting gives us a scientifically derived water balance data, which is based on data observed from remote sensing. So there is no bar on this data. Sometimes we don't get data because it is classified. Sometimes we don't get because this variable is not measured. But luckily with satellites now we are able to get almost all the data that we need in our computations. It is a verifiable data that anybody can verify this information. Anybody can use this information and check whether it is correct or not. So this is, in my opinion, a very good application of space-based techniques for water resources management. There are some limitations of this water accounting plus software. This is the final sheet here. You may read the information written here and I will be back in 2 minutes.